Welcome back to part 2 of our call to action button tutorial. If you haven't watched part 1, I've already designed our button graphics in Photoshop.
James then removed the text and cropped all the white space to create the CSS sprite image that we need for part 2.
So today I'll be adding the text back in with HTML and CSS.
Having real text call to action buttons is not only great for SEO, but it also allows you, the designer, to use the buttons multiple times and easily adjust the button text.
So let's get to it. So I'm working off my desktop in a folder called Call to Action Buttons. I have my CSS sprite ready from last week, and I've also created a blank page which I've saved as index.html. On this page, I've just started by adding some style tags inside the head tag, and I've just started by applying some font to our body just to get us going. Obviously, if you're using your own external style sheet, you can simply add these styles to your separate style sheet, or feel free to add them in the head, whichever suits you. I've also included 3 paragraphs that we'll be using for each of the 3 buttons. The text say red button, blue button, green button, and then I've wrapped each of those 3 text elements in a link or an anchor tag with just a blank link going to a hex which won't take it anywhere. So if we have a quick look in the design view, that's all that we've got set up at the moment. In Photoshop, I've also got open our sprite PNG image. We'll be using the eyedropper tool on this to gain colour references shortly. So let's make a start. Now the first thing that we need to set up is a class that's going to be applied to each of the 3 buttons regardless of their colour. And this will include things like the background sprite, for example, the width, how big we want the font size, the font weight, and so forth. So we're going to apply a class called CTA. So any anchor with the class CTA should have the background. I'm using the prompter to select our background image sprite.png from the folder. Each button is 130 pixels wide, but because we're going to add some padding to the left hand side, we need to accommodate that. So let's just say 120 pixels width, and then padding, none on the top, none on the right, none on the bottom, and then 10 pixels on the left, which makes up to 130 pixels width. Next we can define the colour of the links on our buttons. Now this is all going to be the same regardless of the colour, so initial link colour is white. Now the height of each button, which is important, is 30 pixels. We also want to apply display block to our CTA links. This will enable the entire button area to become a link and not just the text contained inside. Then we want to add the line height. Now again, if we set this to 30 pixels, which is the height of the button, it will ensure that the text is vertically centered. I also don't want any underline or any text decoration, so let's set text decoration to none for our link. And let's specify the font size in pixels, that to 11. And let's set the font weight to bold. Okay, so that's our universal CTA call to action class. So we can already start to apply this to each of the 3 anchors for the buttons. So let's go into the anchor and add class and CTA. And I'm just going to copy and paste that onto each of the 3 button anchors. So next we need to define the 3 classes that will distinguish whether the button is red, blue or green. Now that we've defined the universal CTA, we just have to manipulate certain elements like the position of the background and the text and shadow colours. So the first one we'll do then is a link with the class of red. So obviously this will define the red button. We're going to position the background to 0, 0 because the red initial red background is in the top left of our sprite. Now I'm going to add a text shadow to our buttons. Obviously this won't display on IE 6 through 8, but it is supported on Safari and Firefox, so it adds a nice little touch. And if you are on Explorer, the fact that the shadow isn't there won't really be noticed. It's just a bonus for the browsers that can display it. So let's specify 1 pixel on each of the axis, and we'll have a 1 pixel blur and the colour. So this is the first time then that we need to reference the colour from our PNG. So I want the shadow behind the white text to be the darkest colour of the red, so I'm going to use the eyedropper to select the dark red. And I'm just simply copying and pasting this from Photoshop into the colour of my text shadow. Next we need to address the overstate, the hover state of our red button. So we do anchor hover for the red class. Now we need to adjust now the position of our sprite. So on the y-axis we're going to position this, we're going to lift it up by 30 pixels, which is the height of the button. And we're also going to change the colour of the text to match the red of our little arrow. So again, I'm just gaining this this colour reference from Photoshop, and I'm going to paste that in like so. And I'm also going to change the text shadow colour. Obviously a red text shadow on red text won't really work, so I'm just going to change that by copying and pasting it to white, just to help it stand off the grey a little bit. Okay, so that's the classes for our red button. So we could now apply the red class to our red button. All that we now have to do is just copy and paste this twice for our blue and green buttons, and let's just change the word red there and there to blue, and again let's change red to green. So there's several adjustments that we need to make then to distinguish the three buttons. First of all, let's just get the colours right. So the blue text shadow colour needs to be the darker blue from the stroke. Let's just acquire that. And then our blue arrow colour for the blue text on the hover state. I'm just simply copying and pasting these eyedropper colour references. So that goes there. Let's do the same for the green. So let's get the green dark stroke colour. And finally for colours, the green hover text colour. The only other thing that we need to do then is to just position the sprite in the correct place. So on our blue button, we're not only adjusting the y-axis for the hover state of the blue, we also need to position the blue button into place on the x-axis for both the up and hover state. So because each button is 130 pixels wide, we know that I have to slide the sprite on the x-axis minus 130 pixels to bring the blue button into focus. That's on both the up and hover state. And then if you then add another 130 onto that for the green button to slide the sprite across, you're looking at 260 pixels. So I'm simply using the background position CSS element to move the sprite around in our fixed width and height class. So that's minus 260 pixels there. Finally, we've just got to add the additional classes. So to add a second class in addition to CTA, you just simply go space, then you add the second class. So we've got two classes on each of our buttons. So that should be all that we need to do. Now don't worry if you've missed or not been able to keep up with my narration. All of the CSS and HTML from this tutorial is available to simply copy and paste from our supporting blog post. So switch to the design view. I've got live view enabled so we can see the rollovers working, and we can also have a quick look in Safari. Let's just zoom in slightly. You can see there our buttons working. Thank you for watching this week's video. Next week we'll be exploring the basics of how to style links with CSS.